Similar to many that left religion, I searched for a new community, a place where others might understand what I was going through. It was disappointing to realize that in many ways, the atheist communities I found were eerily similar to what I had left, especially at the beginning of my journey.
Yep. One might even say I'm Jewish.
Oh, that's good for you. That's wonderful. I respect all religions of the world.
I'm Muslim.
Jehovah's Witness.
Atheist.
The Lord is testing me.
Guys, this is a subject that breeds conflict. Can we please do
What religion are you, Jeff?
I'm agnostic.
And yes, I'm aware that the term atheist community is going to have mixed responses. I'm just trying to keep things a bit simpler here. In previous videos, I've mentioned that I live in a very red state, but there are atheists here. During the past couple of years, a couple of community events advertising different topics such as what is new atheism and atheism and Christianity in our community. The first thing I noticed is the majority of participants were in their late 40s and older. When there were younger people, they usually left about halfway through, or they just didn't show up again. Speaking for myself, 2 events were enough, and I barely made it through the second one. The atmosphere felt unwelcoming for a few reasons. There were clashes due to age difference, since the majority fell into the Gen X or Boomer category. Second, there was a clear disdain for those younger atheists. And third, there was a weird conservative anti-SJW vibe. The most poignant example was during one of the group discussions that centered around atheism and YouTube. I avoided interjecting into the discussion as I listened to them laugh at those silly drama channels that combined atheism and social justice. Their smugness was off-putting, and it's taken time for me to process why I've often kept a distance when it comes to interacting with certain atheist forums and some content creators. It's often a lack of empathy, unnecessary aggression, and seeing too many similarities to the religion I left, such as not holding people accountable. What happens online can deeply affect our lives, and when certain matters brought up aren't taken seriously because it's just silly online drama, it allows it to continue. While I understand that the overarching idea of making atheism more acceptable exists, it should not override calling out bad behavior, especially when those same people will call out similar behavior in religious spaces.
I'm talking about people who don't critically think about atheism to the same extent that they ask that theists think critically about their religion, okay? I'm not saying atheism as a concept. I'm saying these big logic men that do logic arguments, and then in reality they're not well thought out. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about atheists as a concept. I'm talking about, because there's like a certain breed of creators that do this, right? Like Matt Dillahunty does this as well.
A few things before starting. Not everyone's experience is the same, and not every atheist is deconstructing after leaving religion. It's not a monolith, and while there are debate bros and performative feminists, there are some creators that utilize empathy and intelligence in their content. Second, this video is focused mainly on 2 creators as examples to illustrate how poorly the atheist community was at calling out bad actors. If you're part of that group of people whose first reaction is to run to the comments to defend or rationalize their behavior, ask yourself why this criticism has that reaction for you. Third, this is not focused on the philosophies and theories of atheism, and I do not need a definition. Fourth, I'm not interested in a debate. This is not a debate bro channel. Fifth, this is mainly focused on atheist creators and atheist spaces, not atheists versus theists such as Christians. There is plenty of that. My focus is atheist creators not being called out by the same people that critique religious creators. Don't make me turn off comments. If you can't play nice, take your toys and go home. People can disagree. Reasonably-ish, maybe. Feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell, and with Mothra the Bunny of Data Science, let's discuss.
Hit the subscribe. Or don't. I can't control you, and there shouldn't be rules anyway.
Leaving religion can be a long process. I heard all the stereotypes in church about atheists being mean and bitter. Around the early 2000s, atheism on the internet, felt just as uninviting as the church I attended. Spend any amount of time going through r/atheist and it won't be long until you find comments like this. Defining terms in order to gain clarity is different than going out of one's way to be anal retentive about nitpicking details while missing the big picture. Throughout this video, I'll use the term community, and while I understand that yes, an atheist community is like herding cats because there isn't really much to tie them together and there's not actually a community, it's just a shorthand version I'm using to refer to atheists in general on YouTube, online, or otherwise. Atheism would be the overarching idea, and there are subgroups and communities within that who don't all agree on everything. I don't expect every person that watches this to agree with me. That would be ridiculous. but it's important to look at whether or not something is effective in reaching a goal, and it's important to call out bad behavior within our own communities, however that looks. Religious fundamentalism has caused harm, and it is something to push back against, but toxic atheists can cause harm as well. When there are posts like this in the subreddit, the OP appears to be struggling with those next steps after leaving religion. Whether ill-advised or no, they go to the subreddit and leave the familiar question, only to be met with condescending responses giving a definition that was not asked for. Atheism is not a religion, but leaving a community, especially high-control ones, can be isolating, and it takes time to critically analyze all the teaching and rules that were ingrained. Sure, they can try and find a group that shares similar hobbies, but those types of suggestions are missing the heart of the issue, and soon these posts tend to fade out after only a few comments. This isn't to say that every single user needs to be welcomed with open arms or bombarded with tons of comments, but how is this focus on the semantics pushing back against the stereotype of snobby atheists trying to prove they're the smartest person in the room? Is it really encouraging much discussion or skepticism? In the movie Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, Wayman doesn't accept that fighting and anger is the way to move ahead. Instead, he persuades Evelyn to use empathy.
Please, be kind. Especially when we don't know what's going on. 我理解到你不是一个服输的人，我也何尝不是，只是我们选择的处理方式不一样。
To be empathetic to override fear, anger, confusion is extremely difficult, and the people that are able to do this have an emotional intelligence that is hard to find. Leaving a high-control group can create seeds of anger and revenge. One of the things I often went back to while deconstructing was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It was one of the quieter shows on TV and made me feel calm as a child. The show may have been directed at kids, but we're never too old to remember what we should do with the anger we feel.
What do you do with the mad that you feel? When you feel so mad you could bite. When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong, and nothing you do seems very right. What do? Do you punch a bag? Do you pound some clay or some dough? Do you round up friends for a game of tag or see how fast you go? It's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong and be able to do something else instead and think this song. I can stop when I want to, can stop when I wish, can stop, anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this and know that the feeling is really mine. Know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can.
More recently, shows such as Bluey get praised not just because it helps heal our inner child, but also addresses life with a combination of empathy, logic, reason, and compassion. Understandably, many that leave their faith will ravenously consume as much knowledge as possible to make up for lost time or subpar education. Trying to look at life with purely a logical mindset doesn't help us improve. Conversely, having an emotional lens does not make us weak. Ignoring emotions does not equate to higher intelligence. Creators sharing their deconstruction journey can help others, and those, quote, silly drama channels in atheist YouTube have brought more understanding into the conversation than some of the more well-known atheist creators.
So some atheists will say, I don't give a shit, I don't care, facts don't care about your feelings, we have to tell people the truth, and I actually disagree. I think it's unkind when Christians don't care that other people just trying to be good people are going to hell. Sometimes they seem to get off on it. If you read my comment section, they can't wait for me to go to hell. But I think it's also unethical for an atheist to not care about someone's psychological suffering when they lose religion.
In fairness, atheists being accepted in the broader population has a rough history in the US, and some of the main voices have been more confrontational historically. While I understand its place in the world at that time, society has shifted. More people are leaving religion today, and when they're searching for information or help, it can feel just as isolating and judgmental in atheist spaces. Being overly aggressive tends to be unsuccessful in spreading ideas. In the PubMed article linked in the description, Dehumanization as a response to uncivil and immoral behaviors. The introductory paragraph reads as follows, quote, social norms are essential sources of information that people use to orient themselves in the complex social world. Among social norms, research points out the importance of civility in human interactions. When we talk about civility, we refer to a type of ethical behavior that includes courtesy, manners, and good citizenship. However, experts today argue that civility encompasses more than good manners and etiquette. It also requires an awareness that extends beyond the self, involving respect and concern for the well-being of others and the community. Therefore, along with good manners, civil behavior involves tolerance, self-restraint, commitment to others, social involvement, responsibility, and an active engagement in creating, protecting, and sustaining the community." End quote. Essentially, the two studies used in the article illustrate that a person's cognition decreases when uncivil behavior increases. They're less likely to hear what's being said. Granted, in the discussion portion of the article, they do indicate the limitations of the study, such as the mental fatigue from participants, impact of gender, and intercultural perspectives. However, it gives credence to the theory that treating others in a civil manner means that we are more likely to foster positive interpersonal relations, something to keep in mind throughout this video.
How do we get where faster if we don't know where we're going? This is a process of discovery where we're constantly learning. And the process is about getting better, getting better. How do we get there faster? I would argue that one of the best ways to get there faster is to convince the world that they don't have a good reason to believe whatever religious crap they believe. That's the start. Because the roadblock to discovering the right answer is anyone who's convinced they already have it. And religions are convinced that they have the right answer.
If you think I'm wrong about nearly anything, you have several times a month that you can call in and tell me why. Now, of course, the people in the comment sections are rarely actually brave enough to do that. They're only brave behind their cartoon avatars and their generic usernames, which are like this sort of generic first name followed by random numbers.
You have
no, sir. No, sir. No, sir. You don't get to, when I say give me a good reason to believe in God, how does all of this goes on top of, shut up. How does all of this goes on top of your social culture? How is that a good reason for believing in God?
No, Rob, because we've already heard this before. Matt and I got it. It's one of our most viral clips. It would take us weeks to explain just the concept of biblical slavery to you.
Okay. George, you're aware that we legitimately don't know who wrote those books. And we also know that they were written 30 to 40 years after.
Stop. George, do you know what this is I'm holding in my hand?
You're holding you're going to quote the Bible. I'm pretty sure you're going to quote the Bible where it says the same thing. But there's atheist scholars who also say that that the Gospels do bear record of Matthew. For example,
George, if you would shut the fuck up, you little runt, and listen to me and stop presuming what I'm going to say. What I asked you was, what am I holding in my hand?
When someone calls into a show and is treated in this manner, how is this fostering a deeper discussion? For example, this is a short clip to show that the person who called into the line is struggling to voice their question. And because Matt and Jimmy are so stuck on semantics and assuming they know what the question is without trying to get clarification first, they overwhelm the caller.
I am a polytheist. I draw spirituality from a lot of different places.
Matt doesn't deal well with crying people, and I seriously feel like Maddie's like crying right now.
We'll return to this a little bit later. All this to say that there are reasons I don't follow certain creators on social media. I try to choose those who are able to understand that there's more to life than being the smartest person in the room. Creators need to be willing to address criticism they face and understand that not every single person is going to blindly follow and only respond with positive critique. To explain where I'm coming from, I'll briefly touch on debates on YouTube before focusing on a couple of creators. The atheist sphere is not a monolith, and I would be remiss not to bring up a little bit about debates on YouTube, especially in the mid to late 2000s. Many of these were between atheists and Christians, or discussing topics related to evolution. Some of this has dropped off, but there are still channels that cover debates. This isn't to say whether or not debates should be removed, but at this point, most debates feel like a newer version of trash TV.
Oh my god, you want to say that to my face? You come down here and fight me, yo. We said we weren't gonna fight. You said you were gonna be peaceful. Well, you know what? That went out the door when I found that you were an alpaca. A dirty, dirty alpaca. How dare you? Fight me!
Admittedly, sometimes I still tune in to watch a few here and there, but for the most part, debates tend to be more entertainment more than anything else, which is fine. It may change some people's minds, but I don't think it's the most effective way to reach a goal. I think Sir Sick wraps this up best.
If you don't know how I feel about debate, well, no one ever proved anything, but who was the better debater in doing so? How very useful. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that they can't be entertaining, but that's it. Being better at arguing than someone doesn't make you right.
There are arguments on both sides for why channels will participate in debates, such as helping people identify if they are part of a high control group by starting to question what they've been taught. Debates are not inherently evil or useless, but people aren't leaving the church because a theist got dunked on during a call-in show or debate.
Watching someone debate is so interesting because I think how someone debates says a lot about them as a person. Do they wait their time to speak, or do they speak over others? How do they respond when asked a difficult question? Is their rhetoric focused mostly on the arguments at hand, or do they try to change the topic when things get dicey? What I don't think you can glean from a debate is how correct someone is. I mean, if you're debating a truism like do squirrels have 8 legs, pretty much no amount of flashy verbal tricks is going to make you sound correct.
Articles I've linked below, both religious and non-religious sources, have the overarching theme that younger people are leaving the church because of the judgmental nature of the institution and hypocrisy of the leadership and members. And they're not just leaving temporarily like past generations, they're leaving permanently. With this available data, it would behoove those wanting to push people towards atheism to use this information to their advantage. Some of these debates do have their place, and it can be cathartic to live vicariously through people that are willing to put themselves on the spot. If people are leaving the church due to the judgmental nature and hypocrisy of leadership, and these same people observe the same actions from atheist creators, why should they look further into atheist media? Which brings me to Jimmy Snow, the lack of accountability within an echo chamber and hypocrisy of some creators.
Jim?
Yes, Captain.
Jim.
Yes.
As far as the non sequitur show, in the description I've linked a few different videos for this, along with the death of the non sequitur show for those who want even more background. Fair warning, if yelling makes you uncomfortable, then this video will probably be triggering. To sum it up, ridiculously short, Steve McRae and Kyle Curtis were the hosts for the channel. There was miscommunication, lack of information, and power struggles. Creators started to take sides, and it was quite telling. Once Jimmy realized that he was backing the wrong horse, he was no longer friends with Kyle. Jimmy put out a statement, and nothing ever really happened to his channel at that point. Again, extremely oversimplified, but the way that Jimmy acted during this would repeat itself in the future. While the post from Jimmy about no longer being friends with Kyle seems to no longer be on the internet, or at least where I can find it, Mika's rhetoric gives a breakdown and is one of the videos linked below for full context. A couple key points. He says he didn't do anything wrong.
Now, regarding the attacks towards me from Steve McRae and crew, I am not apologizing to Steve for my being incorrect to trust Kyle. I took no public actions and made no public statements, despite the fact that he admitted talking about it with Nate the Lawyer on livestream just like 3 paragraphs ago. I took no public actions and made no public statements about him regarding this case, and so his demand for an apology is strange in the first place.
He brings up trolls.
So I also said a comment about the trolling. It's interesting that you're mentioning that he's commanding an army of trolls, which Steve might be able to argue that he was doing it if he agrees that he did this for a rightful cause. In that case, Jimmy's pumpkin lore, like all that pumpkin stuff, was to troll a pastor that promoted horrible things. I love a little light trolling, okay?
He wants his audience to pretty much drop it.
So the request I have for you is this. I would like this to be the only statement I make on the matter. Steve won, that's what happened, and I accept that. At this point, even though I strongly disagree with how he has acted, I believe he was legally in the right and was fucked over by Kyle. I will ask you all to allow me to move on, and I suggest that you do too.
And of course, the passive-aggressive digs.
Thanks all, I love most of you, and I have 3 question marks, that doesn't make sense.
Not to mention, there was also a cease and desist, and Jimmy and Kyle still streamed to the channel.
They were on the channel when there was an alleged cease and desist. You clawed and screamed at the last minute. And when you're like that, it's really hard to ask for grace in return. So then there will be those who try to insist this remain in my purview, me, but it will be futile attempt, as what I've stated now is entirely how I feel, and that's all I will ever be willing to share.
I just like to know, do you admit Kyle was wrong? Puddle responded, perhaps because you have made yourself look like a fool over this issue, have shown absolutely no critical thinking skills, and have failed at being a skeptic. It's not a good look for someone that advocates for such things, but bury your head in the sand if that's what suits. Dude, I gotta tell you, you are nobody to me, and I genuinely don't give a shit about what you think about me. Have a great life. Doubt you will, but do try. I guess I hit a nerve. Are you always this easily triggered? Toodles. You really see what you want to see, don't you there, Puddle?
Having gotten out of this kerfuffle mostly unscathed and just letting the whole thing blow over in time, Jimmy continued with Dear Mr. Atheist content as his audience grew with new subscribers seemingly unaware of his involvement in that ordeal. Some of us remember though.
Pepperidge Farm remembers, but Pepperidge Farm ain't just going to keep it to Pepperidge Farm self free of charge. Maybe you go out and buy yourself some of these distinctive Milano cookies. Maybe this whole thing just disappears.
Even so, this didn't mean that there weren't other red flags that some of his audience unsubscribed for. A couple collab videos he did with Brenda from God is Grey, and the interaction between these two felt a bit uncomfortable.
Today, we are going to share a conversation between me and my #1 YouTube bae, Mr. Atheist, aka Jimmy Snow. For any of you not familiar, but I feel like a lot of you are, Jimmy and I cultivated a very beautiful relationship. I originally reached out to you and asked if you wanted to have a conversation and promised that I would keep it nice and civil. And you were like, that's weird. Usually I have to promise people I'll keep it civil.
Another item was poor research. This is part of the many now privated but not deleted videos on his channel. Jimmy misinterpreted the language of a bill being presented in Australia based off an article in The Sun. In a video from the Hereticals, they broke down what the bill actually meant, that it was not a law yet, and why the article was from a biased source.
So basically, Jimmy used his video to attack what he was calling a new law that had been passed in Australia. It hadn't been passed. Just really want to be clear. It hadn't been passed. It still hasn't been passed. Nothing's been passed.
When contacted about the discrepancy, Jimmy took the critique in stride and accepted the correction. I'm kidding, of course he didn't.
Not only did Jimmy go on the attack, but all of his minions, all of his fans started piling on in this same thread. He was aware of this because he could see what was happening. He was liking things and, you know, he was actively enforcing this behaviour. He's out there talking about his mental health and how people are attacking him. He had absolutely no issues doing that to me with his 300,000 subscriber base compared to my virtually nothing. Where was his concern for my mental health? Where was his concern for me? He didn't have any. All he wanted to do was say, I'm right and you're wrong. He didn't want to listen. He didn't want to be corrected. And this isn't an opinion. He was wrong.
For those of you who are unaware, he's starting to talk about essence of thought. But you know, he can't be specific about what he's talking about, because if he's specific about what he's talking about, you might go and look about what happened with Essence of Thought, and that might lead you to find out what happened with the Non Sequitur show. And he wouldn't want you to know about that now, would he? Jimmy claims to be an advocate. So if you claim to be an advocate, why are you letting somebody who says that they're an LGBTQ plus advocate steal from an LGBTQ plus member of that same platform? I don't know where the line is with Jimmy.
Some of his content also has not aged well. In another video that is privated at the time of this recording, Jimmy responded to an interview about the allegations against Lawrence Krauss. In the video, he brings up that his channel now has 250,000 subscribers, and he mentions the crossover in audience with Jacqueline Glenn.
Before we do, let me just do one little happy thing here. Thank you all. On Thanksgiving, we hit 250,000 subscribers. Those are the people that I hope I'm making the best content for, because that is a group of largely unserved people in the past. Now, there are some
that is who I hope to make content for, because that is a group of largely unserved people in the past. Well, you certainly made content for them, and then you took advantage of them. So, way to go.
Exceptions to that. Jacqueline Glenn, for example, she and I have a large crossover audience, especially a large female crossover audience.
One clip I want to highlight is that he says he wants to bring in more empathy. Another item to keep in mind for later on.
I respected trying to debunk things like the gender wage gap in a totally biased and absurd way. And then more recently, many of these people, many of these red pillars or the people who have taken part in the intellectual dark web have been the anti-Me Too type. Not just saying, hey, I think this specific person's allegations are untrue because I think I have these good reasons, whatever they may be, but actually trying to crap on the concept of women in general being honest about this thing that we should have been taking a lesson from. Like, holy crap, do any of us not know somebody who has been assaulted? Do any of us? No, they didn't take that lesson from it. They took, oh, here's an opportunity where we've said we'd like to change the default to sympathy, compassion, and belief. And because of that, I'm going to say that is anti-skepticism. And I am going to label this idea of trying to head toward a society where a certain group of people aren't afraid by another group of people.
Not all content has a long shelf life, and sometimes creators feel trapped into making certain content. It was clear Jimmy wanted to do something different.
After this issue with Gabby Hanna and all the girlies making the videos, the Sometimes Show backlash also kind of came from those videos. I know I made a comment on it because I found that it was very manipulative, that he would do community tab posts and he would do a bunch of stuff whining about how nobody was watching the content, even though he worked so hard on it. Why would you do that to him? He worked so hard on content that nobody liked.
Even then, I mean, I my career before YouTube, I was a photographer. I did commercial and portrait work. And so I thought my life was going a totally different direction. And then just sort of thought, like, there's a gap, there's a hole in YouTube where there's lots of atheist creators, but none of them communicate precisely the way I communicate. Also right now, it's mostly a lot of cringy they call themselves anti-SJWs. It's a lot of like, yeah, you know, religion's bullshit, but don't let the gays get too gay kind of stuff. You know, that sort of stupid thing. There was a lot of that going on. And so I basically was like, I've already got most of the production equipment. Only thing I really need is a microphone because I'm already a photographer. So I've got cameras and lights and all the visual stuff. And that's when I just decided to start participating in the conversation from that end. I knew a little bit from running my own business that collaboration and marketing is the big thing. So I immediately reached out to an organization that had their own shows and platforms and started collabing with some people from there. And then it just grew from there. And I went down different avenues of what content I prioritized the most. Some of it now I look back and I'm like, meh, should have stuck more to this than this, but you know.
And since this is kind of the get to know an activist thing, I mean, how did you identify early on? I mean, did you use the atheist label? Were you kind of in and out? Did you consider yourself a skeptic?
So I did it the wrong way that I now try to advocate against as much as possible, which is I came out as the angry atheist, fight with everybody, get on Facebook, and I wanted to call 30 people an idiot a day to make myself feel smarter. At the same time, my engagement had just broken up. I'm going through this identity crisis, and I have mental things about myself that I still don't understand. We're just starting off in therapy to get to those. So I'm angry. I feel slighted because I've been lied to. And this is why I give the 90% satirical advice that when you freshly become an atheist, shut the fuck up for 4 years and just listen.
Originally, Jimmy Snow's channel was called Dear Mr. Atheist, and then he changed it to reach a wider audience. After a while, Jimmy Snow worked to roll out his new content called The Sometimes Show.
To me, every time, I know it's funny because there was a time when I had the most consumed atheist channel in the world. And I get it, why that's how people feel. I so don't feel that way about myself that every time somebody expresses it, I'm just like, lower your expectations. It's all downhill from here. My goodness. I'm truly proof that anybody can do it.
You're pretty down to earth. I will definitely say that.
True. My ego is large and my aspirations are bigger. I don't know. I don't know what you mean.
Jimmy Snow tried to roll out new content called The Sometimes Show. The Sometimes Show debacle timing intersected with a few things. Part of his audience was starting to get frustrated with Dear Mr. Atheist content for a variety of reasons, such as those previously mentioned.
He did one with, I think it was him and Telltale, I believe. I think it's the guy with all the cults. I'm not a super, atheist community viewer normally. And then recently, I would say the last 6 months or so, I'm just sitting on the couch watching on my Chromecast or whatever, watching Jimmy's show, and he's talking about philosophy and stuff, and I'm just sitting there, I'm like, that's not right. I would just sit there and spit stuff out to my television, and I'm like, things like the origins of like philosophical concepts or religious doctrine and their origins and how things are intended. I'm like, no.
He didn't have any. All he wanted to do was say, I'm right and you're wrong. He didn't want to listen. He didn't want to be corrected. And this isn't an opinion. He was wrong. His video was wrong.
Jimmy keeps silencing critics, and not just this time with the Gabby Hanna drama, but also prior to this, he was silencing people who were telling him that they didn't like the Sometimes Show. I unfollowed because I don't like the Sometimes Show. The thing is that he equates this because it's too political and you guys just don't want politics out of me. That's not the case. I actually watch a concerning amount of YouTube in general, but I watch also a concerning amount of political commentators. The issue with Jimmy's show is it feels like a TV show. And I don't want to watch a TV show when I'm coming to YouTube.
Because he does kind of seem to assume that people are his fans and assume that people already like him when they're interacting with him. So there's an arrogance to being like, oh, well, how long have you been a fan of mine? I'm not.
And then the situation with Rachel Oates came to light nearly a year after it occurred. Again, extremely oversimplified. In short, Jimmy stuck his nose in where it didn't belong without getting all the facts or doing any basic research. Rachel posted a tweet without Jimmy's name attached, asking if she was interpreting his message wrong. He identified himself when he didn't have to as being the one that sent the message, then proceeded to argue with and block some users. There were several messages back and forth, and at the end of everything, Rachel and Jimmy were no longer friends. Much like how Jimmy sided with Kyle during the non-sequitur show situation, he now defended Gabby Hanna until it was no longer beneficial. His actions were the same as before. He doesn't necessarily think he did anything wrong, or at least it wasn't intended that way.
That said, I am only going to tell the truth, and the good news is whether or not you believe me when I say that, I'm bringing receipts for the whole thing. The other reason why I resent this is this might make Rachel look bad.
Good.
Honestly, I actually resent that might happen. Because even though while I feel hurt by her once again saying I said things I didn't say, or misrepresenting things I didn't say, I think she might still think she's telling the truth.
All right, so let me start here. I absolutely think I did things wrong, but
Stop. I absolutely think I did things wrong, but stop. Null and void.
He mentions trolls.
And you know what? None of those comments have in here. All of these comments attacking me, telling other commenters they should unsubscribe, and just saying hateful things about me. None of the people driving it have once gone, Jimmy, what's your side of the story?
I did last year, and he gave it to me.
I probably would have addressed this sooner if that was the motivation, but it hasn't been. It's all been hateful comments and all just saying, Jimmy, you did this. And there's going to be no accountability for any of that, by the way. The only people who are actually held accountable in this relationship, I talked about this earlier this week on the Trisha Paytas, Ethan Klein thing. The only people who will be held accountable for the misinformation that was spread, or people held accountable for still 2 lies said about them, are the public figures involved. None of the audience who have done bad things here.
But I think when you are really trying to make right or make good on a situation, your verbiage matters. And especially with how he follows it up with.
But I'm also resentful of a lot of conspiracies and jumps to conclusions that people have come up with.
He pretty much wants us to drop it.
I need to be done with this for a while, and I'm really hoping by covering enough I can be. It honestly doesn't feel like hyperbole right now to tell you that this is killing me, because the dark places I've gone, very, very dark places. All I honestly want is to help people and make people's lives better, and I've been failing to do that lately.
And there are passive-aggressive digs.
So the number one reason I turned off comments was this, and many of you still won't agree with it. It isn't that I can't receive any criticism or that I want to make sure no one ever sees a negative thing. It was that the narratives being spun in the comments I felt weren't accurate.
Oh, no.
People were making claims about me that weren't true, and even if that was their honest assessment, I didn't have time to take on and correct each one. And if I tried, I probably would have fucked that up anyway. So there are entire channels who get virtually no views on any other video, except now when they're talking about me or they're talking about Gabby and me. But now it actually works to just be me. And I'm not kidding. Those channels are getting thousands of views. There will be people watching who go, they are? Well, I'm going to jump in, which is disappointing. And because I know I'm not the way they say I am, it fucking hurts, man, to see people do that. And for them to not care about how they are painting you because it's getting them so many views.
This narrative is like really disgusting. Like, okay, so I know that I'm gonna get more views on this video as my return to YouTube than it would be if I just posted a video like, hey guys, I'm back, you know, 31 subscribers, what's up guys, how you doing, you know. Like, that's true, and it is part of the reason that I'm making this video, because I know that like there's built-in traffic for it. I'm completely aware of that, and it would be dishonest of me to say otherwise. However, this, like, that fucking narrative, bro, like, I'm so sick of every single creator who gets a little bit of criticism going, oh, well, people are only talking about me because they get views. You get so many views off my name.
There were those in his audience that would watch the Sometimes Show as a way of supporting Jimmy, even if they weren't really a fan of the new stuff.
YouTubers change their style all the time, and I don't really mind that. In fact, I kind of like his new content in a way. I like the other one, I think, better, but this one has a different genre that it's kind of filling, and I do respect it for the most part.
There's already plenty of late show hosts named Jimmy with meh comedy. It's an overly saturated area of media, and it isn't why I had started watching his stuff to begin with. His new content felt like background noise and didn't have anything unique that made it stand out from other similar channels. Jimmy has reiterated multiple times his passion for the Sometimes Show, and it can be frustrating when you pour your heart and soul into a project that the audience you built may not have a strong interest in. The lukewarm interest in the Sometimes Show intersected at the same time as a situation with Rachel emerged, which is unfortunate since it was a way for him to try and divert accountability. Even in current videos and interviews, he still glosses over what happened with Rachel and doesn't really accept why the Sometimes Show didn't work when it initially came out.
To build a new version, but a familiar version of the Sometimes Show, which did end a couple of years ago. Not actually because of the performance of the show. I know there are people out there who like to talk crap about it, that the show itself failed or anything. It actually didn't. It was going great, and we had finally passed that moment where people had started to realize, like, okay, I'm getting what this is and everything, but other things got in the way, the types of things that simply wouldn't get in the way now.
I bring up this summarized-ish version of Jimmy's history as a way to illustrate how he's responded to criticism and dealt with accountability in the past, especially since there weren't any large atheist creators calling him out. By looking closer at the latest fallout, I don't think it's unsurprising that he would remain friends with Matt Dillahunty and start to mirror his mannerisms and approach. After the non-sequitur incident fell through the cracks, Jimmy expected he'd be able to just wait it out again. If we look at the situation with Rachel, it didn't really come to light until about a year after it occurred. Except the internet rarely forgets. There will always be at least one person randomly socking away knowledge and media. Some of Jimmy's audience was reaching out to other atheist creators on YouTube during this more recent event, and the response was disappointing. One creator was Telltale, and there was a message sent to his wife that I will show here. Even though there were very valid points brought up, it ended up being negated by the last sentence. I shouldn't have to remind anyone that this is inappropriate, whether in DMs, comments, or otherwise. Then again, I've also been around the internet since...
Are those your grades?
Yeah. I don't think that I deserved an F. Do you?
You can't do that.
Already done.
Well, that's not important. Sending a message like this just gives fuel for people to not take accountability because the point of the message is lost or negated. At least there were some people not letting Jimmy off the hook and called out that other atheist creators seemed to see this as a non-issue. If a pastor of a church or a Christian influencer had acted the way that Jimmy did, there would have been a different response. With the way it played out, it came off as this boys' club or protecting their own with this type of inconsistency, and I unsubscribed from multiple channels when I saw the echo chamber grow. For the most part, many, but not all of those critical of Jimmy, were femme-presenting creators, which is probably obvious from the clips used in this video.
Some of this is freaking valid criticism, Jimmy, and like, you need to address the valid criticism. Also, to be fair, like, it's been a while and he did finally address this. I did see in Brina's stream where he did say, you know, it's taken me a while to address this because it's taken me a while to process it. I get that.
The problem that I have with turning the comments off and stuff like that Like, I completely understand needing to block that stuff for your own mental health, and I completely respect that. My issue is that you have a platform. And so when you cut off comments and stuff like that, like, we're not just talking to you, we're talking to each other. It's a community. That's how this works. And so when you turn comments off, it makes it so that A, we have to find a different place to discuss how we feel about your behavior, because like you said to Rachel Oates, there's a person on the other end of the screen.
And I think now that this new person has stepped forward on the Freely Talk About Jimmy subreddit, I think it's time to start considering holding people accountable. And I don't mean in a legal sense, but I mean the people who basically gaslit all of us into being crazy, dramatic, you know, people with all these like sexist terms and of how awful we were just doing this for views.
Before I continue, I do feel it is my responsibility to preface that the purpose of this video is not to spread hate, not to advocate bullying or harassment of any type, nor am I calling for the cancellation of any creator whatsoever. What I am advocating for, however, is accountability. Accountability in the sense to understand that what Jimmy has done is wrong, and to understand that what he did wrong is about the victims. And what I'm expecting from Jimmy is an honest reflection on that, and to illustrate a genuine intention for change.
But I'm very nitpicky when it comes to apologies and explanations, because I think words matter here. Words don't always matter. Sometimes words are just words. But I think when you are really trying to make right or make good on a situation, your verbiage matters. And especially with how he follows it up with.
But I'm also resentful of a lot of conspiracies and jumps to conclusions that people have come up with.
I'm also resentful. So now not only what you're saying is, I'm admitting this, but what you're saying is, I fucked up, but let me tell you why I'm mad at you because I fucked up.
Jimmy referred to the debacle with Rachel Oates as drama, criticized his audience for the backlash, was only willing to take criticism from certain parties, and kept moving the goalpost on how we should have responded. If Jimmy had reacted differently, I might consider the situation drama. However, it ended up being a symptom of a larger issue, and now Jimmy is mask off. Claiming that it's just drama doesn't absolve him from anything or lessen the effect of his response. Matt Dillahunty is a significant voice in the atheist community, and by not calling Jimmy to account when people reached out to him, he signaled to his and Jimmy's audiences that Jimmy's behavior was inconsequential. Jimmy was correctly called out by those in his own YouTube community, and he took a page out of Dillahunty's reaction book, claiming that people were spinning narratives. To give a clearer timeline, the situation with Rachel came to light around May or June of 2021. By late June of 2021, Matt Dillahunty uploaded an interview with Jimmy titled, "Get to Know an Activist, Jimmy Snow." Nowhere in this interview was Jimmy confronted about any of his behaviors, and because of the timing and the title, it feels like this is an effort to override the voices of those speaking out about Jimmy. When I watched this interview, it felt like a discussion between two dude bros. Jimmy's activism isn't really brought up. They mostly talk about how they got to the atheism realm and pat each other on the back for not being in the pickup artist community currently. Between the tweets and this interview, Matt treated the situation as quote-unquote drama and showed that he cared little about those speaking up. Even in the comment section of the uploaded interview, when users pointed this out to Matt, he said he had no interest in researching the situation further. Kind of how Jimmy didn't really research some of his videos fully either. How skeptical. Once comments were removed from Jimmy's first response video, the audience then had to share questions, comments, and concerns elsewhere. After some misinformation from a couple bad actors, an entire subreddit was labeled incorrectly. For context, the subreddit had been around long before the response video, but it got a lot of attention after Jimmy released it. Constantly shutting down means of communication is not a great look if you emphasize how much of a skeptic you are. Considering that information control is an issue in many churches, one would think that this type of thing should be handled differently by atheists if we're trying to separate from harmful groups. Channels that made videos in response to this situation weren't chasing clout or trying to cancel him. It was about finding a way to voice concerns that were going unheard. As far as those false narratives that Jimmy thinks everyone was throwing around all nimbly-bimbly from tree to tree.
Do I look like a cat to you, boy? Am I jumping around all nimbly-bimbly from tree to tree?
No.
According to my assessment, I believe the only person who really had a video out by the time that Jimmy turned off the comments was Savvy Writes Books, right?
They were there to build and participate in a public attempt at pushing a few different narratives, at frankly pushing my cancellation.
Jimmy, who was calling for your cancellation? Who? Literally who? I literally haven't seen any of this. Like, I keep hearing like, oh, they want me canceled. Oh, they're pushing a false narrative. Where? I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it.
Who is it that's misrepresenting him? Like, he keeps talking about like, oh, people keep misrepresenting my narrative. And it's just like, oh, they didn't talk about my thoughts and feelings. Like, who's misrepresenting your actions? Because as far as I've seen, like, people all have like cited sources. Like the Reddit thread where I found Brina, like, those are all like people literally have like screenshots and timestamps and links. Like, who's misrepresenting your behavior?
So my question is, who were all these drama channels that were spinning all these narratives? If the only drama channel that had a video out by then was Savvy. Makes you think, huh? Also, shout out to Savvy for being fucking brilliant.
Part of skepticism is show, don't tell. If there were all these spinning narratives spreading like wildfire, it was unclear what these were supposed to be exactly or who they were coming from. You can't just say something is false, expect the audience to accept without question, then be shocked when the audience determines the evidence presented is not actually false. The commentary channels came with receipts. Jimmy mentions that he will only take criticism from legitimate sources. Savvy Writes Books appeared to be one of these, and she mentioned they discussed the book review process, something that Jimmy could have easily researched. However, he didn't appear to see Katie Daisy as a resource who had experience and knowledge to be an advocate. I would put those clips here, except her channel is now gone. No thanks to an overzealous and misguided fan of Jimmy that inappropriately contacted her employer and affected her employment. For someone so interested in helping marginalized groups and advocating for mental health, I'm unable to find where Jimmy admonished these actions or said he was against fans doing this.
People are coming after everything about me because of this. Everything about you. And now that I've mentioned except my dog, but now that I've mentioned it, then I guess maybe that's gonna happen now. Okay, you're friends with people who say I dog. You're friends with people who say I encourage people to feed their dogs chocolate and to kill them. Jimmy, these are people you are acquaintances with, I guess. I don't know what you mean by friendship anymore, but these are people that you've promoted on your channels and promoted elsewhere.
These types of actions are inappropriate, period. If you're willing to accept good criticism from everyone, yet only accept negative critique from certain parties, it makes it easier to create an echo chamber. Not every viewer is going to like or agree with every video out there. This is the internet.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present to you the internet.
Since Jimmy has hitched his wagon to Matt Dillahunty and they're working together on the line, we should probably talk about Matt for a little bit.
I can explain. Let me explain.
And this gets back to something that I've said over and over throughout the years. If you ask the wrong questions, you are unlikely to get the right answer. And the correct question for those is, how did the sun come to be? How did grass come to be? How did the universe come to be? How did my brain come to be? How did language, logic, whatever, how did this come to be?
Matt Dillahunty has discussed his path to atheism a few different times, so I won't rehash much of that. He was raised Southern Baptist and had considered being a minister before being involved in atheism with entities such as the Atheist Community of Austin, the ACA. The first media I saw of Matt were his calls from the Atheist Experience, and I lost interest quickly as his mannerisms were similar to one of the pastors from my old church, and his arguments weren't all that compelling.
I think you're mistaken, because the Hitchens razor doesn't say that which can be asserted without evidence should be dismissed without evidence. It says it can be. If your reading comprehension isn't sufficient to adequately and accurately address the razor, why should I care what you think about it?
What?
Your reading comprehension sucks.
Good arguments for the evolution of God in a naturalistic or materialistic world. Like Robert Wright wrote extensively on that. What I'm just trying to say is that none of us know exactly the whole absolute truth. So
you don't seem to know anything, Tyler.
But it's not pointless, right?
It is.
Because
I just said so. Didn't you hear me? I'm right. I'm always right.
Is now no longer part of the ACA, and now that Matt works with Jimmy on the line, one of the most irritating parts for me is watching someone talk down to people without fully understanding their question, and it's confusing to see so many comments being positive towards the way he acts as if it is acceptable.
The amount that you can say without Matt referring to Matt Dillahunty, without it being defamation because of his own shitty actions and words, will not get over his attack on Madison for wanting to discuss equality in the sciences. I inquired about what situation they were talking about, and they replied it was a call into the line with Matt and Jimmy. There was a clip going around. It goes on to say that I'm assuming Matt, was just a nasty bully in it. I have been told as defense by his fans that that's just Matt. The argument that they're probably going to bring up is that science doesn't make any moral claims and it has no claims on morality, on what is innately moral and immoral or ethical or not ethical. But I have a feeling based on what the person on Twitter told me, if I had to guess, it would be more about the issue of people being excluded from studies. So if I had to venture a guess, I would think that that is probably the topic that they want to talk about. But the way that it's being worded here in the title, and perhaps the way that the caller said it, it is a little bit problematic. But knowing how Matt is, he's probably going to get hung up on the wording and not actually going to allow honest feedback and discussion. Because let's be frank here, not everybody is capable of wording their thoughts in a way that is 100% accurate to what someone's trying to say.
My question was, I see science falling behind on civil rights issues compared.
I see science falling behind on civil rights issues.
To individuals who are listening to the people affected.
I'm just curious if this has to do with the conversation that I actually brought up about gender, for example, and transness. I'm just curious. I'm curious.
Science has nothing to do with civil rights issues.
I left the church for a myriad of reasons, such as people that acted like Matt, and if those same people have a large influence in the atheist world, do I even want to be involved with anything connected to atheism? I had questions when I was first getting into atheism and searched for an environment that welcomed open discussion. Currently, I would say the line appears to be more an arena for yelling or humiliation. I recognize that being curt and aggressive has become part of Matt's brand, and from an entertainment side of things, I can understand that, but I'm not convinced that this method is the best approach. Matt was in the ACA for a long time, the purpose of the ACA being, quote, the Atheist Community of Austin is organized as a nonprofit educational corporation to develop and support atheist community, to provide opportunities for socializing and friendship, to promote atheist viewpoints, to encourage positive atheist culture, to defend the First Amendment principle of separation of religion and government, to oppose discrimination against atheists, and to work with other organizations in pursuit of common goals, end quote. The mission is, quote, dedicated to promoting atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government, end quote. I mentioned the ACA purpose and mission because Matt was heavily involved in this organization as a former president, a former board member, and now a former host. The ACA has its own history and issues that I won't get into here.
She said, well, then HR did, and Matt responded, I'm on the effing board in all caps, hence the title of this video. Some more context. Matt Dillahunty was president of the Atheist Community of Austin for some time, and then for some undisclosed or unknown reason, he stepped down. And didn't really tell anybody why. I don't know if that was in private. He didn't tell anyone why. I'm sure he told people why in private. But as far as the public, I don't think it was ever clarified why. That said, he is still on the Atheist Community of Austin's board. And my interpretation of the screenshot that Autumn showed is basically him going around the board to intimidate Autumn with the information that she has and that she wants to come forward with in the context and her experience with him specifically. I am going to read a message from Autumn that I had that she had sent me with the intent of me reading it. This is in reference to the audio that I'm going to be sharing with you soon and responding. Autumn says, I never said villain. I said treats people like crap. I said he's a Karen and aggressive, and I said he is irresponsible with his power. What vilifies him is his own behavior and the fact that people know my character.
From my understanding, when the ACA reached a certain point, it was decided that a person could no longer be part of the board as well as host a show. Matt stepped down from the board and continued to host. By no longer being part of the board, he is no longer entitled to be privy to the same information as before, and it can be difficult to let go of that control. Eventually, Matt left the ACA, and in a recent interview, he spoke out about how he considers it to be his job to convince people to be atheists now, a sentiment that Jimmy seems to share.
So, like, I say I'm doing penance, even though penance is a Catholic thing and not a Baptist thing.
Right.
And that I spent so much time in it trying to convince people that Jesus was God that now I feel like I owe it to myself and everybody else to kind of counter that.
In his video about leaving the ACA, he mentions different emails and communications, but can't be bothered to bring them. While I can give some grace to the fact that he was trying to get this video out somewhat quickly, it's just interesting that we're supposed to take his word for what he said in his communication and emails. Just a little reminder that those commentary channels had receipts when they talked about Jimmy.
I'm not stopping. I'm just not working with the ACA anymore. And if you don't care about the story, that's cool. I get it. Head on out. This is my take on events over the past year. I'm not putting up screenshots, though I have them, and I'm not mentioning names. I'm not going to show you any emails because while I saved them and while I'm still a life member of the ACA, although I guess they've probably revoked it now, they've disabled my email address so that I no longer have access to those emails. So I'll be paraphrasing.
If the mission had this high importance to Matt while he was in the ACA and now he feels it's his duty to convince people to be atheist, how is the way he approaches call-in shows like The Line fulfilling that? I recognize that not every caller is going to be kind or act in good faith either, but I don't think feeding into strong emotions is fostering a deeper discussion or guiding them towards critical thinking. In more than one call, Matt assumes what the question is and starts answering without letting them interject. Even if we account for technical issues and delays, it's excessive. As mentioned in Part 2, Section 2, when uncivil behavior increases, cognition decreases, which doesn't encourage positive atheist culture or critical thinking.
Sometimes nobody's even going to pay any attention until there's a cis-het white guy or somebody else with, a mountain of privilege to be able to speak up and kind of point the microphone at you. And, myself and a number of other people that I work with, we're serious about if you're going to put me in this position where all kinds of people are going to listen to me, pay attention to what I say, I'm going to do what I can to point that microphone at other people.
Hello everyone, I'm Jimmy Snow, and I really just hope that's enough. What you're about to watch is a clip from my show, The Sunday Show, which happens on my channel, The Line. Mostly just letting you know that because a lot of people apparently don't know that that's mostly what I've been up to lately. However, I'm also here to let you know that November 5th will be the return of the Sometimes Show. There will be a special on November 5th, a little fun thing to cover all the time we've been gone, and then that week, probably that Tuesday, the new version of the Sometimes Show.
Become kind of formulaic where it's like things look the same.
Right.
And the same is true for online debates. And so Jimmy Snow and I had an idea for a debate show that is going to have a slightly different format so that it's somewhat of a cross between what would be a regular call-in show and what would be a full-on debate, where it's sort of a short form 30-minute debate where it's not two sides presenting competing opening statements, but one person is, I'm going to demonstrate this, and then the other person is the roadblock they've got to get through.
Matt was working with Jimmy Snow on The Line prior to leaving the ACA, which is a bit of a gray area. As mentioned before, The Line is a call-in show. It's difficult for me to sit through watching these, just like it was difficult to watch The Atheist Experience when I first started looking into atheism. If you're creating a show where people call in and are likely to have the same question multiple times, either screen callers better or understand that this is what your audience is going to call in about. Another possibility is to set up a particular theme and have a more focused topic, which I didn't see much on The Line but could have missed it. Point is, they can adapt and change if something isn't working in regards to reaching the goal or mission. Much like debates online, these call-in shows are mostly entertainment at this point. Since Matt emphasized the importance of the mission with the ACA, I tried finding a goal or mission for The Line. I'll show the goals here, and they are business-oriented with a focus on expansion. I wasn't able to find the mission for The Line, and if it was related to convincing more people to be atheist. If it's for entertainment, say it's for entertainment, that's fine. A call-in show or debate can be just for fun. My issue is that if Matt sees his job as convincing people to be atheists, then is there something to show that The Line is doing that, or is it just fueling the emotions of an audience that is already primed to go into a situation ready to debate rather than discuss critically?
I'm curious.
Science has nothing to do with civil rights issues.
Okay. Ding, ding, ding. I knew it. Which is fine. It's fine that he correct. I mean, I understand because I do think it's just a poor wording on her part. I just feel like there's a way to communicate to be able to get to the point that she's trying to make more accurately so that a discussion can actually be had.
Okay. George, you're aware that we legitimately don't know who wrote those books. And we also know that they were written 30 to 40 years after.
Stop. George, do you know what this is I'm holding in my hand?
You're holding you're going to quote the Bible. I'm pretty sure you're going to quote the Bible where it says the same thing. But there's atheist scholars who also say that that the Gospels do bear record of Matthew. For example,
George, if you would shut the fuck up, you little runt, and listen to me and stop presuming what I'm going to say. What I asked you was, what am I holding in my hand?
Like, if this was an adult and I was just watching this for entertainment purposes, yeah, it would entertain me. I've been entertained by the Atheist Experience. I was entertained by them for years. I binge watched a lot of their episodes. And yeah, like Notes from Autumn just said in the chat, she said someone once put it this way: atheists watch him for catharsis because they want to have a playground bully on their side. It can be cathartic to watch this, especially when you've spent years in, you know, religious spaces feeling sort of berated and isolated, and you're angry at the pain and the hurt and the religious trauma that you've went through. Yes, it is extremely cathartic to watch the Atheist Experience. And I probably wouldn't have as much criticism for the show, minus this whole minor situation, if it weren't for the fact that it's a nonprofit. It's just really put in some light of thinking of how are they standing by their mission.
In watching videos from the channel, the calls fall mostly into 3 categories. The first is people with a genuine question, second, people that just want to argue, and third, people that have an idea or a question but aren't sure how to word it. The third category tends to be people that are fans of the line, atheists and theists alike. Jimmy and Matt are so fixated on the way things are worded and running with those assumptions that callers may be overwhelmed.
I can hear in Maddie's voice that they are overwhelmed and distressed. And I would think if you're going to engage people in this, if we take the entertainment aspect out of it, we need to remember that these are human beings and apply that into the way that we are talking to people and giving them the time and space that they need to feel like they are being heard and able to articulate their thoughts. Even if they are misspeaking or not saying things accurately, there are better ways to have a discussion. I have a feeling that Maddie probably just felt really talked at and just completely overwhelmed, and like, because they weren't articulating the way that Jimmy and Matt needed her to or wanted her to in order to have the discussion that she wanted to have. And obviously this clearly wasn't what she wanted to discuss.
They either give up or forget what they were trying to get at to begin with. Both of them have become angrier over time, and it seems to have amplified after working on the line together. Because of the question, they're going to get people calling in with similar answers. The question is too vague, so if they're wanting to give different answers or face a challenge, then the question posed by the host should be posited in a way that helps guide callers towards a particular direction. In most of the calls I've watched from the line with the two as hosts, or sometimes just one of them, it appears to be a competition to just win, and if they humiliate the caller or dunk on a theist in the process, they consider it good. I get it, watching a train wreck is captivating. Looking back at the Atheist Experience video uploaded November 20th, 2020, on male reproductive rights, there are comments on both sides that disagree with how Matt handled the call. The live chat was also removed from the video at the time of this research. Wherever you fall on this issue, the way that Matt addresses the caller's questions shuts down any discussion and makes it difficult for them to get out what their point is.
So if there are consequences to having sex, then how is men being able to voluntarily terminate their parental rights not trying to achieve consequence-free sex?
Well, I see the sperm donor in that situation saying, "I'm not financially able to support a child right now."
That's a load of fucking horseshit, and that's the most dishonest thing you've said. You have now constructed a fictional scenario in order to claim a hardship when you're talking, previous to this moment, you were talking about a general principle, and now you're like, what if the dude's broke?
And I'll also add the warning that it does get into SA during part of the call.
We're talking about general rights. How dare you go to a very specific scenario? It's dishonest as fuck.
Right, and he's still...
We don't make laws based on who's broke.
Right, and he's still trying to have consequence-free sex.
Yeah.
If
he was broke, he shouldn't have been fucking.
Yeah.
In this next video, the caller starts explaining that having people from different walks of life making laws is important. Not only does Matt disagree with this, but he goes into the most extreme example immediately and asks them that unless they have expertise in writing laws, how do you know if they've done a good job? Matt's justification being that we have lawyers because most people don't understand laws. However, the analogy or example that he uses to illustrate this in regards to software actually supports the caller's points more than his.
I disagree. I disagree. For the same reason that I'd like my software written by people who understand how to write software, I'd like my laws written by people who understand how to write laws. And if Marjorie Taylor Greene has a team of lawyers in there writing shit that she doesn't understand, then she is superfluous and should not be involved. She is in the way.
For one, when writing software, it usually involves a team, some with expertise, some without. As far as writing the literal code, yes, there needs to be coders. However, there should also be subject matter experts that understand how the data works and what the input and output should be. In addition, we do need people like Marjorie Taylor Greene because a program should be written in a way that is usable and hard to break. What better way to test for defects than to have someone that goes out of their way to try and break it? A sign of a good program is being able to account for these types of users. There's far more involved in writing software. This is just to point out that it's not a strong example and it doesn't exactly support Matt's stance. After this point in the call, the back and forth was difficult to understand. The caller was certainly giving excessive information and their point wasn't entirely clear.
I no longer give a fuck what you have to say at all, Prime. I was going to actually have Jimmy put up a poll to see how much longer we should let you drone on irrelevant stuff. But I'm done giving you chances.
After a while, Matt hangs up on the caller. The title of the video is Matt Dillahunty Destroys Caller's Argument on Who Should Make Laws. But Matt didn't really give any evidence that destroyed anything. He gave a few examples and mostly talked over the caller, telling him to get to the point before losing patience and hanging up. How is this call much more than entertainment? Lastly, in this video, they realized that the caller was arguing in bad faith and had been banned previously, but they kept going. So how is this call providing much outside of an entertainment value?
Hey John, why did you change your name from Clark after you were banned from calling the show? No answer?
Well, setting that aside, John, since of the two of us, I'm the one that's the expert on rats.
They hung up. Fuck you.
You ran off.
Fuck you in your fucking face.
There may be some people where this approach works, but as I've mentioned previously, this isn't set up in a way to encourage deep critical thinking or skepticism. If I wanted someone to yell at me from a platform telling me how to think and shouting down at me when asking questions, I'd go back to church. This is already going to be long enough without delving further into how Jimmy tried to claim the title Funday Fridays for his show, or that Matt didn't want to lose his time slot that he worked so hard for that just happened to coincide with the atheist experience.
I used to watch his channel, and so I was 100 times more disappointed in him when all the allegations of like power dynamic abuse and like having all these weird relationships with fans and just the way that he over-sexualizes everything. You can go on his Twitter and see that. Oh, and the fact that he tried to steal Fundy Fridays, and I asked him not to, and then he attacked the mods from my Discord and said they were being ableist. So yeah, I would just keep that in mind.
My mission continues just as before. I'm moving on. I'm doing shows. I might be doing a show on Sundays at 4:30. I'm still deciding. Why give up a time slot that I built over years when I still have work to do? So today, in just 7 minutes, go watch Forrest and Dave. They're phenomenal. They are wonderful people. Do not harass them. Do not call the show about this. Do not pester the ACA. Do not send hate mail. Do not do any of the things. This is done. I'm going to be doing, because I'm no longer with the Atheist Community of Austin, I'm not doing the Atheist Experience on Sundays, but I'm not necessarily willing to give up the Sunday afternoon time slot that I spent 17 years cultivating.
Right.
So we're talking about doing an episode of The Hang Up on Sundays from 3 to 4:30 Central. And if that time slot works, then great. And if it doesn't work, then I'll do the 4:30 to 6 time slot, and people can just make a choice of whether they want to watch, my show live or the Atheist Experience live and watch the other one later, however they want to do it.
The two of them working on the line together, they feed off each other's energy, and any criticism will be ignored or fall on deaf ears, especially since they want to expand into more arenas.
My project, The Line, is expanding and growing rapidly. It is becoming a monster. As a community, it is becoming a beast. It only has about 84 to 85,000 subscribers right now. However, it is performing like a channel that has much more. In fact, it performs like my channel did when it had much more and was much more active, and I was much more active on. The things that we have planned for it, as far as in-person community building, conventions, all of that stuff. And this channel will become a part of that network of shows. The Line being the network, the channels being The Line. We're now launching The Line X, the third channel, which will be this channel, but potentially renamed. However, maybe not. I don't know. I haven't figured out how the rebranding and renaming is going to go yet for this channel. However, when the Sometime Show launches, it will be the Sometime Show on The Line.
When the noise started to dissipate, Jimmy started uploading a few videos again, expressing that he wanted to try new things. He mentioned that he wanted to be like Hasanabi or Ethan from H3. Because he's a commentary channel and not a drama channel. I find it interesting that he picked two large streamers that have also had some controversy. However, they handled a bit differently than Jimmy did.
If I could just sit there and say, hey, tell me what you believe and why, give them as much time as we can reasonably do for that, and then have an actual conversation about why we disagree. That's far more valuable. I don't do debates. Debates aren't WWE events. I don't need intro music, although we did in one case as a joke.
Some of the comments that I've gotten here from Matt supporters are like kind of I get a kick out of them. Like they're a little bit, some of these are great. So the biggest,
don't get me wrong, I like Matt as a person, but I don't think that he was a good front leader for the purpose.
Oh yeah, no, to be clear about what my bias is I have never seen, anytime Matt Dillahunty's been in my general vicinity or around people that are tertiarily related to me, he's been a nightmare to deal with. Like, he has not been friendly, he's been rude, he's been arrogant, he's been cruel.
If you try to search online for criticism about Matt Dillahunty, the majority of the results will be from a church or similar religious organization. As far as atheists, there is some criticism, but you have to dig for it and have an idea of where to look.
You know what I mean? I think you are responsible for the audience that you attract. And more so not even the audience you attract, but the space that you're actually creating in your comments and in your community, right? I do think you're responsible for how you regulate it and how those people, the overall impact potentially of how those people are expressing themselves. I do think that can be somewhat of a reflection on the creator.
If he knows who he's talking to, like, Matt has his biases, right? Like, if he knows who he's
Sure,
talking
everybody
to,
does.
He has you as like somewhat reasonable, then he will actually be fair. He won't straw man things and all that kind of shit. But his big problem, and it's something I've seen sort of grow over time, is like the more he's dealt with idiots taking calls and stupid people and whatnot, the more his default position has become to treat anybody who's relatively unknown to him as though they're one of those people.
As far as Jimmy Snow, the subreddit Freely Talk About Jimmy was created because there weren't many other options to be able to voice questions or concerns.
The reason my Jimmy Snow videos attracted attention, and the reason other people's Jimmy Snow videos attracted even like more attention, is because people already agreed with that opinion. People had a problem and they wanted to hear other creators talking about it, and not everybody has the capability to like make their own content and build their own community in that way, you know? And that's why they were attracted to it, and that's why they wanted to hear other people talking about it, because they were frustrated and it was relieving to actually hear somebody else talking about it.
For example, when there are negative comments in a subreddit about Dillahunty, it's followed closely by a comment rationalizing his behavior. I find it odd that when there is negative criticism from atheists about Matt Dillahunty, it's usually quickly shut down. Matt and Jimmy claim to be part of the skeptic community, and part of this is questioning what is being presented. Someone that is a skeptic is not just accepting the face value of what's being presented just because you're a fan, but it's also not disagreeing just to disagree or play devil's advocate. One of the common responses is that's just how Matt is, or some variation of how he acts is just part of the brand. An excuse that's not necessarily afforded to other creators. Even when Matt does respond with a tweet or comment about bad behavior, it feels empty because there's not much change in behavior. If someone calls into the line, they need to have specific examples and come in ready to battle. Jimmy and Matt say that the line is open to discussion, but it turns into a 2-on-1 attack, assuming the question and steamrolling the conversation. By the end, it's more of a contest to see who is right. There is little active listening or clarification from these two until it's too late into the call.
And I don't for a second think that I should be the only or top dog representative of atheism. I just think I'm always right and I'm the best me.
Fans of the line seem to accept this behavior, so why should they make any changes if it continues to maintain an audience for them? You can't just put up a tweet to calm down some backlash or as a reminder to oneself. The combination of a toxic fandom with Matt and Jimmy's history of behavior creates an atmosphere where they can easily brush off criticism they don't agree with.
Kind of fuel for that fire, and that really bothers me. But here's the problem.
Also, Phantom Stars brought up another point where they said it's not like we could discuss it on Jimmy's platform. So.
I shouldn't even need to include this point since both Matt and Jimmy are still on social media a lot, but both have spoken about cancel culture, so here we are.
Of course it works, or deplatforming doesn't work. And they're like, of course it works. Look at what happened to Milo Yiannopoulos, or look at what happened to
what's his face, Alex Jones. And you have these situations. First of all, Alex Jones got deplatformed from YouTube and yet is apparently richer than ever. But
yeah, he's thriving more than ever. Yeah.
Cancellation of a single individual, which you might succeed on, where you succeeded on that one individual, you have still
Where has cancellation on any individual actually been succeeded on unless they were literally thrown in jail and remained in jail? Like, where has that actually succeeded ever? Ever? Because it's not a real thing. I'm pretty sure, like, the side that was trying to cancel people, it's mostly made as like it's mostly made as a you know, a hashtag to attract attention, like cancel so and so. Okay, that doesn't mean that that person's actually going to be canceled. Like, it's an expression of frustration.
I've seen a lot of people, unfortunately, making comments like people are taking advantage of the fact that he's already being quote unquote canceled, which I don't even think he's really being canceled. I just think people are unsubscribing because they're seeing a side of him that they don't like, which people are allowed to unsubscribe.
If someone comments that they dislike Matt, it's followed by why, as if this is incomprehensible, where they're told that he is just tired of answering the same questions repeatedly. There are people who like the content that Matt puts out, while I don't. That's fine, not everybody has to like or dislike Matt. No one is owed a platform here or anywhere else. If Matt is tired of repeating himself, he doesn't have to be on the call-in show. If Matt is truly tired of making the same arguments, then maybe the line needs to be adjusted or have different people answer. He can work on other things to help steer people towards atheism if that's truly what's important to him. If being on social media is causing too much grief for Jimmy, he's not required to stay here. I don't think that's what this is really about, though. If Jimmy wanted a break from the internet, then he wouldn't be focused on the line or the Sometimes show. Jimmy wanted a break from the backlash and the criticism. To bring it back around to the beginning, downplaying supposed internet drama and crying cancel culture allows bad actors to keep getting away with poor behavior. The online world is heavily intertwined in the real world, and ignoring crappy behavior because it's just the internet allows this type of thing to keep happening. Calling out Jimmy was not drama, it was calling him to be accountable. And Matt showed that he just didn't care what people had to say. Jimmy was never canceled and still continues to exist online, just like Matt. There are numerous examples of how poorly some churches handle those in leadership. They will often cover up, ignore, or downplay transgressions of those with influence. Atheist creators have called out this behavior in people like Steven Anderson and Greg Locke. We should also do the same when it's in our own backyard.
Does it matter that Bull's part of the LGBTQ+ community and was autistic? Because Jimmy seems to care about that. Does any of that matter to... I don't think it really matters that much outside of the fact that Jimmy claims to be an advocate. So if you claim to be an advocate, why are you letting somebody who says that they're an LGBTQ+ advocate steal from an LGBTQ+ member of that same platform?
One of my biggest frustrations with Jimmy and Matt is the way autism is brought up when they are critiqued, and it's one of the many reasons I'm making this video. For those that have made it this far, I am a high-masking, late-diagnosed woman on the spectrum with a degree in higher education and many years of therapy under my belt. At no point in my life have I ever been in a privileged enough position for anyone to describe my behavior as, "That's just how she is."
Does he think that, like, neurodivergent people are, like, incapable of understanding what we did wrong?
Because we need to accept that the world belongs to neurotypicals and that we have to go out of our way just to think about them and make them comfortable.
No, the world belongs to everybody, and it's our responsibility, just as it is neurotypical people's responsibility, to, like, try and get along with everyone. And guess what? Neurodivergent people are a minority. And so sometimes we do have to sometimes we do have to defer to the neurotypical people because, like, that's literally what typical means, is it's like they're in the majority. And so, like, most people are neurotypical. So, like, yes, we do need to try and get along with neurotypical people. Sometimes more than neurotypical people are forced to try and get along with neurodivergent people. So yes, sometimes we do share more than we shoulder more than our fair share of that burden.
Oh, why is this being brought up right now? And ask yourself, why is this being brought up right now? If somebody has a better understanding, please let me know, because at this point, this just feels like it's being weaponized here, and I do not like it. I am not here for it. It also seems very disconnected from the fact that the people you interact with and have issues with, it's just the assumption that they must all be NTs, they must all be neurotypical. But it's the assumption that everyone else you interact with is like neurotypical. I feel like is kind of also the idea that's pushed out, because it pushes out this perception of if people have an issue with what I'm saying or how I'm treating them, then it's ableism. Is the kind of the perception that people are left with. Yeah, no.
So I've interpreted this in two ways. Firstly, it seems that from that elaboration from Jimmy's reaction to an autistic fan, that he does in fact at times use autism as a shield to justify how he reacts to others. He may not literally say it, but he certainly demonstrates it from what we've all seen. Of course, autistic people shouldn't apologize unless they understand why they are doing so. And just an FYI, I happen to be autistic too. Stimulation overload is common amongst those on the autistic spectrum, and this can sometimes cause an emotional reaction in certain circumstances. However, as we get older and as we become more accustomed to the knowledge that we are autistic, it is up to us to discover how we can manage this.
I bring this up to point out that Jimmy and Matt would also fall in the late diagnosed category, and I'm not particularly comfortable with how they use it. From my understanding, Jimmy was either in the process of getting a diagnosis or has one, and Matt suspects that he also falls in this criteria as well. Using a diagnosis or suspected diagnosis as a way to explain away poor behavior is a privilege that many of us do not have, especially those of us in marginalized groups, and our success is often dependent on how well we mask. Being autistic does not automatically mean that a person is into numbers, computers, or has a high IQ. Our brains function differently, and part of this includes issues with social cues. Those of us on the spectrum have a wide array of interests and talents, and many of us can take criticism with grace and actively try to treat the people around us with respect. Being autistic or neurodivergent does not mean we can't learn how to better interact with others. It's not a free pass to treat others poorly or ignore criticism. As Jimmy mentioned in his video, if you've met a person with autism, you've met one person with autism. This is a sentiment that is expressed by many others as well. It's interesting that he wanted grace from his audience, many of whom were neurodivergent. Yet Jimmy was not receptive to their criticism unless it was from, quote, qualified sources. Jimmy's reaction to those who said he used autism as a shield was to call this ableist.
I am more than happy to have this discussion and talk more about whether or not Jimmy actually is sort of maybe using his autism as a shield, or even not so aggressively to say as sort of an excuse, or is a crutch about navigating conversations. It could be. It sounds like it's something that he's still struggling with. The answer is that I'm still not sure. I'm more than happy to have this conversation, and I would love to have this conversation a little bit more with people who know more than I do about it, and hopefully I'll be able to. But it's easy to understand why people, some of who I think it's safe to assume are also autistic, may have felt like you're using it as a shield. I think that's a fair thing to be questioning.
While that may or may not be the case, at the end of the day, Jimmy messed up and didn't want to listen to any criticism. It didn't help that Matt didn't say anything about it either. The way the situation with Rachel played out and the actions surrounding it made it hard not to see using autism as a shield as another tactic to shut down feedback he didn't like. Masking to function within a largely neurotypical society can be incredibly draining, I won't argue that. But it doesn't mean that a person is unable to learn how to react to criticism. With Jimmy being mask off, it confirmed my feelings toward not wishing to be part of the subscribers and community that heavily associate with Jimmy Snow.
If you're using this platform for anything other than what you actually prioritize and think is amazing and fantastic and or important or devastating or scary, and instead you prioritize what you think people will watch, what you think people will subscribe to, if your priority is the reception instead of the message, you may get more subscribers. And that's a bad thing.
From what I can tell, the prior content from his channel is not deleted, but mostly privated or moved around in a different format. On occasion, an older video will pop back up to the public, but it's few and far between. In watching the most recent uploads on Jimmy Snow's channel, there's an underlying anger and resentment still simmering.
All in an effort to build a new version, but a familiar version of the Sometime Show, which did end a couple of years ago. Not actually because of the performance of the show. I know there are people out there who like to talk crap about it, that the show itself failed or anything. It actually didn't. It was going great. And we had finally passed that moment where people had started to realize, like, okay, I'm getting what this is and everything. But other things got in the way, the types of things that simply wouldn't get in the way now.
Every episode of this series is going to have to begin like this with a timer, and I'm going to explain that in a minute, in 2 minutes actually. Or you could just skip forward 2 minutes. I don't care. Do whatever you want. Break the rules. They shouldn't exist anyway. This is a brand new series, and this is a new series called Shut the F*** Up.
Leave a comment what you think, Jim. What would Donald Trump's nickname for me be? Could it be Little Jimmy? I'm huge. Have you all seen that picture of me and Aaron Ra? Because no one believed I was huge until that picture. I am a fucking ginormous man. I'm just large in presence. That's, some people will just say I'm trying to get around by saying fat. Yeah, that too.
I put her over on the line. If you really want all the details, all the tea, all of that stuff, yeah, that's with the tea. There's no gossip there. And to tell you the truth, I'm now so off-put by the concept of ever being mistaken for a tea channel that you might have noticed in the last year, I have dramatically changed my approach to even response content.
Or what's the fucking point? That's right. I'm wearing sweatpants. Am I doing feet for free? I don't know about all that. Jesus Christ, get a tan, you fucking hobbit. Oh my fucking God. I'm keeping them crossed so you can't pretend you're putting something between the arches.
The feet. I told you, didn't I tell him about the feet? He did tell you about the feet.
Those people who always speak with their nose down and their eyes up, saying that, hey, I know everyone was terrible all along, and I don't have any problematic role models. You know those people? By the way, enjoy that while it lasts, having no problematic role models, and stop spending so much time on TikTok. I swear, there are even people I like out there that I know a lot of these people like in common, and by now I'm just waiting. Who's going to be first? Is it going to be H3H3 or Hassan that'll turn out to like have a cat fighting rig?
He has compared himself to wanting to be more like Hasanabi or H3H3, and mentioned that his channel will be wall-to-wall political stuff. Both of these creators have their controversies, and I'm not sure how much different of a voice Jimmy can bring to an already overly saturated market. It seems like he's trying out new content to see what sticks. There is a video with a literal 20 minutes of silence. He also does this again later in the middle of another video with 5 minutes of silence.
I've already been recording for a long time. And if anything, we need to reset. So here's what we're going to do. You thought there was no plan for this. You thought that this was just a one-off. Let's sit in silence for 5 minutes. I'll try to remember to not put an ad up. Here we go.
There are rants peppered throughout as well, whether it's near the end or in the middle or a completely different topic, and it can be uncomfortable to watch.
But this channel, it actually isn't my bread and butter anymore. My popularity actually ebbs and flows because I constantly annoy my own side with how I won't just commit bad people to irredeemability, and I encourage my audience to even be friends with dicks. So I'm not the guy you're still going to try to dismiss me as in the comments, half of which because you won't even watch the video, and most of you will still make that same stupid joke that is being made thousands of times a minute across the internet. Oh, this isn't an airport. No need to announce your departure. Oh my God, all of you are so damn clever to hear a funny quip and then repeat it ad nauseum.
I don't think I have anything else. I'm back, and this is going to suck. I don't even know if I should release this, because it's just, there was no plan. It was literally just going to say, Ron DeSantis is in, so I'm back. It's over. And then he's putting this off. And I've said some version of I'm back a lot recently.
But right now, in Twitter system is a pending application for my account to become monetized. It won't be now because I'm leaving, but the app was in there to become monetized because we were going to expand the line to play live on Twitter, where I actually think we would have had a much easier time finding opposing positions to call in. So this decision is not made lightly. It will mean our company, The Line, and Twitter will likely be leaving a lot of money on the table. And by a lot, I mean 6 figures a year. A lot for our company. That's not much more than a fart for Elon Musk.
Oh yeah, I'm putting no effort into monetization from now on this channel. So hopefully people support, hopefully the other ways in which, but I imagine I'm gonna be swearing too much, and it's just gonna be a lot of episodes that just get yellowed a lot. but I can't stop myself anymore. I think you're going to see an unleashed Jimmy in a way that some of you will like, and some of you will stop watching if you haven't already.
If you're wondering whether or not money and numbers are still important to him, essentially yes. It feels very manipulative and reeks of pickup artist tactic of nagging. Jimmy will mention Patreon-only videos, which is not unusual for a creator, but he'll also say that he doesn't care if people subscribe and doesn't care if he's monetized. But which is it? Keeping certain content behind a paywall, considering Jimmy's history, sticks out to me.
Patreon will also change pretty significantly. The current model that it's on will probably change to right now it's on a per creation basis with up to 4 creations per month. That will probably change to a monthly thing. And it's going to be exclusively for Jimmy Snow specific extra content. You're still going to get the fundamental stuff, the shows themselves, but there's going to be little extra content on the Jimmy Snow Patreon.
He'll mention supporting marginalized groups, but with everything that has occurred, whenever he mentioned it, it feels questionable. Even the autism thing pops up on occasion. He hasn't completely dropped atheism from his channel, though.
And who is the debate between? It's between myself. This is a digital green screen, by the way. The beauty of this is I'm about to do a debate where I'm going to play the parts of both people in the debate, because one person is myself, Jimmy Snow, and it is my legitimate dialogue. The dialogue you will see when it's me on the screen with this library behind me is legitimately the dialogue I wrote in this back and forth debate between myself and a thing I am calling Christ GPT.
For now, it appears that Jimmy is putting his focus on the line until it grows enough that his old channel will fade to obscurity.
My focus lately has been on my other channel, The Line, a collaborative effort that facilitates conversations between people on, let's call it our side, that is to say like atheist, skeptic, humanist, and people who disagree with us. It's the literal opposite of an echo chamber. If you think I'm wrong about nearly anything, you have several times a month that you can call in and tell me why. Now, of course, the people in the comment sections are rarely actually brave enough to do that. They're only brave behind their cartoon avatars and their generic username.
Ignore it long enough and it will go away, right? He alienated a large portion of his audience, and it's unlikely Jimmy Snow's channel will return to the status it once had. Clinging to this ideal of being right all the time or being the smartest person in the room isn't going to have the same effect it had in the past. More people are calling out creators that act inappropriately, and atheist creators should be no different.
I'm not like huge. I'm a public figure. I barely, anybody ever refers to me as famous or anything like that, I just find to be a delusional person. I show constantly on here, between all my channels, 1, how stupid I am, and 2, how totally human I am.
So my answer to this question is don't take someone else's tool unless you have a better one to offer.
One of the clips I often use on this channel is Lois's speech from the finale of Malcolm in the Middle, and I do so for a couple of reasons.
You know what it's like to be poor, and you know what it's like to work hard. Now you're gonna learn what it's like to sweep floors and bust your ass and accomplish twice as much as all the kids around you. And it won't mean anything because they will still look down on you. And you will want so much for them to like you, and they just won't. And it'll break your heart. And that'll make your heart bigger and open your eyes, and finally you will realize that there's more to life than proving you're the smartest person in the world.
Knowledge and empathy should go hand in hand. There's a reason that atheism has a negative stereotype, and it's not solely due to religion.
So the compassionate stance, I think, is to be tough on bad ideas, tough on theology, tough on theocracy, tough on religious abuse, but soft on people. Compassion that people are doing their best, and it's like taking a binky and blanket from a child and saying you can't have this and enjoying them cry. You don't have to be that mean. Like, we don't have to do that. We can say this binky is actually inhibiting your growth, and there are better tools for you for how to live the good life, and I'll help you with that so that we don't leave people in psychological suffering when they lose kind of their foundation and anchor built with religion.
If the goal is to build a more supportive and knowledgeable community, we need to recognize and call out atheist creators with the same fervor as the religious creators that are critiqued. Jimmy's example used in this video, partly because of how recent it is and how it carried over into other areas of YouTube. Jimmy seems to latch on to whoever he thinks will echo his own sentiment and possibly give him more clout and popularity. With his latest Pokemon evolution mirroring Matt Dillahunty, I anticipate that history will repeat itself. Jimmy is banking on his transgressions fading away again. Admittedly, it is unfortunate to see how a channel can be painted into a box and make a creator feel as if they cannot change their content, but blaming the audience for not wanting to pivot along with him to new material is unrealistic.
I get concerned if we don't talk about these kinds of things, that things get lost and forgotten and ignored because of it, including victims, including how people are feeling about Jimmy, how there is a lack of response by the atheist ACA community that he's a part of, that people haven't even put two and two together about Jimmy's involvement with the Non Sequitur show, and that he's a complete fucking hypocrite.
In the last year, some large creators have started to be called out for their poor behavior. All these creators will have loyal fans regardless of what happens. The greater portion are no longer accepting this and calling for real accountability. Atheist creators should be no different. For now, I choose to keep at a distance of many atheist channels and communities, such as those heavily connected with Jimmy Snow and Matt Dillahunty. Until next time.
License and registration? Aren't you the two that pulled me over before? Beg pardon? How are you Mounties now? Or should I say Meounties? Hang on. Do you really not remember this guy? You just fucking with him. Yeah, I have no idea who he is. You know, I heard everything you said. Son of a bitch. We've been doing that for years.
Come on back and see me again for some more fun learning. And remember, treat other people the way you want to be treated. Okay? I've got to go now. So long!